Has a game ever made you wonder? Who was responsible for letting the project go in such a strange direction? What convinced the developers to release such complete nonsense? That's kinda what went through my head when I first played Gears of War 2. Now, don't get me wrong, I adore the original. Its unique future baroque art style and influential game design make it a timeless classic. Gears 2 is a great game as well, but simply lacked the same innovation and, to me, kinda lost its charm by embracing tone-deaf cliches. So, when Tecmo announced their take on the genre, my interest was piqued. Quantum Theory was PlayStation exclusive at first, so initial reactions were cautiously optimistic. Could this be Gears of War for the Sony crowd? The 7th generation of consoles was a challenging time for Japanese developers. Studios had to adjust to modern HD development. Creating high-quality assets became much more labor-intensive and costly. Traditionally, teams were used to writing their own engine for each game. Collaboration and resource sharing between teams was almost unheard of. Meanwhile, in the West, the Unreal Engine slowly established itself as the weapon of choice for lots of developers, and Western games began to dominate the sales charts. Around this time, Tecmo was looking for a third pillar to prop up their aging franchises, Ninja Gaiden and Dead or Alive. And producer Keisuke Kikuchi, at least, was pretty frank in their intentions. I actually love this interview, as it slowly shifts from regular questions to Kikuchi asking the reporter about the tastes of an American audience. The developers really seem out of their element. Curiously, Kikuchi is not credited at all in the final game. I wonder what happened. Production manager Manabu Nagasaki said the idea to do a Gears clone came from Makoto Shibata, the director, who was very much into shooters at the time. Inspired or not, Team Tachyon, the internal development team consisting mostly of key staff behind Fatal Frame, now had the unenviable job of creating Tecmo's very first shooter. Unsurprisingly, the developers stuck to their guns. Instead of licensing Unreal, they used Ninja Gaiden Sigma's tech as a base, and somehow created a reasonable facsimile of the popular engine. After 2 years, Quantum Theory was finally released in late September 2010, right between Gears 2 and 3. And was absolutely mercilessly trashed by gaming publications and public opinion alike. It was criticized for its derivative nature, poor graphics, unbalanced gameplay. Pretty much anything bad you can say about a video game was leveled against Quantum Theory. So, a bad game was released and promptly forgotten. Why make a video about this 10 years later? I bought Quantum Theory for half price in October 2010, not even a month after release. Over the next few weeks, I replayed it 3 times, drew fan art on my Nintendo DS, thanked the seller in writing, explored all the lore. Heck, I even imported the flimsy art book from Japan for a horrendous amount of money. To this day, I think about Quantum Theory, a game with apocalyptically bad reviews I somehow can't help but genuinely like.
Let me show you what I mean. Put this in here, press the button, you can see me already.
Hey, did you know? Microsoft lets you install Xbox games onto a regular USB drive? And you can put that game data onto your PC? And download an emulator called Xenia, load up the game, and it just works perfectly? I know, right? Enjoy crisp video capture without an expensive capture card. Quantum Theory takes place far in the future. Humanity has wiped itself out again, as it tends to do in these situations. The survivors scrape by in small colonies. At some point, strange living towers sprung up and just stood there. But recently they began to cover the surrounding area with a weird substance called Diablosis that turns humans into monsters. Now that can't stand, obviously, and our hero Sid's stated goal in life is to kill every living tower he comes across. After a brief level with the local militia, designed to resemble the Destroy Beauty aesthetic of its inspiration as closely as possible, we make it into the tower. And here is where the game first wowed me. Its Art Nouveau art direction. The beautiful interiors of the Living Tower stand in stark contrast to its desolate surrounding landscape. Once you set foot inside, you feel as if transported into another world. In here, golden ornamentation and tinted glass create an almost angelic atmosphere. The game may not impress on a technical level, but art director Daisuke Inari really doesn't get enough credit in my opinion. I don't recall any other game using Art Nouveau as artistic inspiration, at least not a third-person shooter. Game director Makoto Shibata: most third-person shooters are military-based and kind of brown. We are trying to bring more color and beauty. To emphasize the living nature of the tower, each level is named after an anatomic feature, enforcing the impression that it is a living being. You visit places like its lungs, a garden fittingly, fly around in its windpipe, and attack reactors that function as its heart.
I gotta get up there and smash it.
After a while you find a teammate, Philana, resident of the tower and looking for her father at the very top. After an initial conflict, the two team up. And while Philana isn't playable, there is also no co-op, the game introduces one of its funnest mechanics. Throw your partner at the problem. This honestly never gets old. Every enemy gets a woman to the face. On death, the enemies explode into huge goop sprites. I guess because the developers didn't have time or resources for death animations. While cheap, this becomes part of the game's identity. You are so strong, you literally vaporize your opponents. Unfortunately, the team neglected to copy the addictive active reload mechanic from Gears. You just have to wait. Over the course of the game, the tower gets progressively more infected by the Diabloses. A lava-like crust takes hold like cancer. This is another thing Quantum Theory is infamous for, textures looking like crap. And I get where people are coming from. But personally I think it just looks awesome. Sure, it's overly detailed and busy, but it just looks so chunky and crusty. I have no idea how to create environments like this, and would love to know how they did it. Keep in mind, only 6 environment artists worked on this game. Around halfway through the game, another big selling point from early marketing is introduced. Shifting level architecture. When it works, it feels really cool. But it is used very rarely. Honestly, it feels like they wrote this on a feature list, but never really cracked it. It's a welcome novelty, nonetheless. The game can be finished in about 4 or 5 hours. But this also means there's pretty much no filler. I can remember pretty much every room and encounter. Levels are short and loading screens frequent. At times, it's a single room sandwiched between 2 loading screens. As I said, the technical base of this game is nothing to write home about. But they make the most of it by using the flavor text on the loading screens for storytelling. At first, the musings of a mysterious narrator appear to reference the upcoming level, but as you play along, you begin to notice they are actually the memoir of the tower's unknown creator, ordered chronologically backwards. Floating in the environment, you can also find small pickups. There are 50 in total. These Eyes of the Tower give further lore and backstory and flesh out the timeline. This kind of storytelling isn't complex or all that innovative, but I was totally invested in piecing together the timeline, comparing dates, ordering the entries and figuring out the lore of this world. Now, of course the game ain't perfect, far from it. Its bad reputation doesn't come from nowhere after all. I think most of it is due to its controls. Something about the stick acceleration seems broken. It's not really input lag, but aligning the crosshair with the target is almost impossible at times. It just feels off. I recommend playing on easy where there's copious auto-aim at least. There are huge difficulty spikes and cheap one-hit kills that you can't see coming. But where most saw an infuriating mess, I see failed ambition. The fact that this inexperienced team got this far is commendable in my opinion. This game was an underdog from day one and only got ridiculed and forgotten. But it's still a creative work that a group of artists spent years of their lives working on. I hope they found or will find some pride in their work, even if I may be their only fan. Maybe that is why I like Quantum Theory so much. It shows that whatever you do creatively, it will be the perfect thing for someone, somewhere. And that is what artistic expression should be all about. Just one last thing. Why the heck is it called quantum theory?